that are here. I do need to take care of a small housekeeping item. Um, so my wife is quite pregnant and is not here right now. She's at home, and this could happen like any day at any time or anything like that. And so I'm up here doing this. So I just want to like, Courtney, she's gonna text you if something happens, just as like a heads up. So be checking your phone. And so if I get really kind of freaked out and start speeding up, it's not because I'm overwhelmed by this. It's because I got to get somewhere. But we don't believe that's going to happen today. I made a cardinal error as a husband on Friday. And listen, I know that none of the other husbands in the room, you've ever done this before. You've ever said something to your wife that you immediately regretted, but I had that happen on Friday. We were sitting there talking, and I was telling her that for Father's Day this year, because I get to do that, I want golf clubs. It feels like a dad thing to do. And she looked at me and she's like, well, wait a minute. I mean, what about Mother's Day? It's like, well, I mean, he hadn't been born yet. So, I mean, she said, well, that's not fair. Well, I didn't make the rules to this. She didn't like that, but I got her something. It was all a big ha-ha joke, a laugh. But just happy Mother's Day to everyone. But I know this, and I thought about this in the 8:30 service. I was looking out, because one of the things about being a pastor is that you know stories about people kind of in your congregation, things that they've been through. And so what I know is like Mother's Day can be a joyous occasion, but I also know that there's people in this room and in this church that this is a hard day because maybe they've lost their mom recently, or maybe for one reason or another, having children has been a difficult process. So I just want you to know that no matter what your circumstances, that we love you and that we're praying for you at all times and all places. And so on this day where we celebrate moms, just know that we are keenly aware of all the variety of situations that go on in a church like this, and we're praying for you guys. So if you have a Bible, if you would turn me to John chapter 21, so pretty much the last page of John's gospel, right before the book of Acts starts. And to kind of give you a little bit of context as to where we are, so we're kind of right there at the end. Jesus has been resurrected. He's been appearing to the disciples. He's like just showing up. He's moving through walls. I mean, he can do some pretty crazy stuff. They think he's a ghost several times. But this particular time, this is the third time the Gospel of John tells us that Jesus appears to the disciples. And I guess they were just kind of sitting in the upper room and got a little bit bored or just kind of hanging out like, you know what, guys, let's go fishing. I think we should go fishing. It's nice. And so they're out there on the boat and they're fishing. They're not catching anything. Nothing's happening. They keep pulling up the nets. Nothing's in there. And Jesus, of course, rolls out and is like, friends, have you caught any fish? No, we haven't. A typical fishing trip that you go on, you sit there for 10 hours and maybe catch one fish, but I guess it's fun. And so they're out, and Jesus is like, hey, just throw your net on the other side, and you'll catch some. And I can just imagine just them sitting there thinking, okay, throw it to the other side. I'm not sure what difference this is going to make. But they throw it to the other side, and they can't, basically there's so many fish they can't pull it all in. And so then they return to the beach and they have breakfast with Jesus, a breakfast of fish, which to each his own, but doesn't sound the greatest. But they're having a meal with Jesus. And then the Lord takes Peter aside and he says this. They have this dialogue back and forth, and it's such an incredible passage for so many different reasons. But starting in verse 15, it said, when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Basically asking, do you love me more than all the disciples around us and family friends? Do you truly, truly love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, feed my lambs. And then he said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, tend my sheep. And then he said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was grieved, because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And so then Peter said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you were used to dressing yourself and walking wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hand, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. This he said to show by what kind of death he was going to glorify God with. And then after saying this, he said to him, follow me. So you have this kind of incredible back and forth. Jesus has been resurrected. All the disciples have seen him. They've been around him. They're kind of, filled with faith after, Christ's death, and they kind of scatter and hide because they're worried about what's going to happen to them. Okay, well, if they crucified our King, if they killed Jesus, then they're also going to come after us. But now since Jesus has returned, they're filled with strength, and so the Lord comes to Peter and asks him what seems like on the surface this very, very simple question. Do you love me? Do you love me? If we're reading this kind of sort of maybe how we would write this story in sort of our modern language, Jesus says, do you love me? Peter says, yes. And Jesus basically asks multiple times, well, are you sure about that? Do you really? And I don't know why, but it's not the same thing, but I was reading it and I was thinking about, like, neither my wife nor I have the most gregarious way of telling each other that we love each other. We're both very monotone people, generally speaking. And so when we will pass each other going to work or whatever, say, all right, love you. Oh, love you too. And then undoubtedly, one or the other person, even though we've said it in the exact same tone, will look at the other and like, are you sure? I'm not, surely it didn't sound like it. Yeah, promise I love you. And it kind of like, at least sort of, Jesus asking that, like, sort of, are you sure? Do you really love me? Do you really love me? It says even to the point where Peter gets really upset about this because he feels like he's answering the questions like, why do you keep asking me this? You know I love you. But there's a reason why Jesus has to ask him over and over and over again, do you really love me? It's because he wants to make sure that Peter truly and fully understands what he's about to embark on and what he and the other disciples are about to go do. Because the only way that they can truly, truly, truly go into this next phase of this beginning of the Christian movement, going and telling people about Jesus in all places and in all nations, the only way they can truly do this is they really, really, really understand what it means to love him. But there's something else going on here that you can't miss. Jesus asked him over and over again, do you love me? And he says, yeah, Lord, I love you. But this is the same Peter that not that long in the past, in John's gospel talks about it happening once, but in Luke's gospel, which is an incredible account of how this plays out, that Peter is the same one that when Jesus is sitting with his disciples near the end, and Peter's kind of like saying all these incredible things, Lord, I'll go wherever you go. Basically, even if it means my own death, Lord, I'll follow you wherever you go. And Jesus looks at him dead in the eye and said, Peter, before the rooster crows, you're going to deny that you even know me 3 different times. And in Luke's gospel, it talks about it how in 3 different moments while Jesus is being, beaten and kind of taken out and shown in front of all the Jewish people, and they're cheering and all that all the disciples are kind of hiding, trying not to be seen who they are. And Peter's one of them. It says 3 different occasions, someone comes up to Peter and says, hey, aren't you one of the guys that was following Jesus? And 3 different times he's like, I don't know him. No, you got me confused with someone else. That's another Peter from Galilee. It's not me. And then even to the point at the end where it says, woman, I don't know this man. And the greatest part, one of the most cinematically insane parts of this entire story is when Peter says it the 3rd time, immediately the rooster crows, and it says that at that very moment when the rooster crows, that Jesus and Peter make eye contact. They see each other across the way. And it's almost like Jesus looks at them like, yeah, 3 times. Told you. And so I think there's a connection between what's going on there and then Jesus asking Peter this question 3 straight times. Do you love me? Are you sure you love me? Do you really love me? But each time that Peter says yes, Jesus gives this simple command. This simple command, and he says it different ways. Feed my sheep, tend my sheep, shepherd my sheep is another way to translate it. Feed my lambs. He gives that command immediately after Peter says, yeah, I love you. Almost giving Peter all right, well, if you love me, this is what you have to do. Because I've shepherded you through this, now you are the one that's going to shepherd this flock going forward. But you have to understand what this might mean for you. It even goes into it at the very bottom, saying, when you were young, you'd dress yourself and you'd go wherever you wanted to. There was freedom in that. But now, at some point in your life, you're going to be tied up in taken someplace you don't want to go. And the Bible tells us this is sort of Jesus' way of forewarning Peter what's going to happen to him. Ultimately, that does happen. We know and we believe that later in his life that Peter was crucified in a similar fashion that Jesus was. So the Lord is standing here with Peter and the rest of the disciples to give them these final commands to make sure, right, do you truly, truly love me? Because if you truly, truly love me, you have to understand what this is going to mean down the road. That I'm calling you to go and tell the entire world the good news that you've been given, but understand something, that this might mean your life. And for pretty much every disciple except for John, that's exactly what it meant. Exactly what it meant. And I was taken aback by this passage as I was kind of studying and reading over it. You know, generally when preacher man gets up here and preaches about the sermon and talk about like the different Greek ways that Jesus says love. But I feel like there's so much more to this. There's so much more to this, and for me, it's an enormous challenge and a borderline conviction on my heart. As I sort of read this over and over again, we live in a country that right now, it says that pretty much like every younger generation, a larger and larger percentage of that younger generation is leaving the church. They're leaving the church and not even sure if they believe that any of this is real anymore. They're not all becoming atheists. They believe something. They believe there's something out there, but they certainly don't acknowledge that what we proclaim as Christianity is what's true, and that percentage keeps going up and going up. The sheep are leaving the stable. They're running away from the shepherd. They're out there in this world. And I get asked, I guess it's because I'm youngish. I get asked all the time, I was like, well, what's going on? What are we doing? Why is this happening? And listen, I don't proclaim to have all knowledge. My wife sometimes accuses me of believing that, but I don't. I don't have all knowledge, but this is what I truly, truly believe. I really, really believe that where we have gone wrong is a big sort of American church in the past however many decades, it's led to this moment where more and more people are abandoning faith. It's not because the story of Jesus has become less effective or less desirable for people. It's the fact that we as the church have forgotten our calling that Jesus gives Peter, that we are called to feed the sheep, to feed the lambs. And this was deeply convicting for me because I know that in my 10 plus years of ministry, it seems like, and not to go into a whole big diatribe about this, it seems like that I have been more involved from a church standpoint in politics and infighting than I am actually ministry. Because it feels like the American church at this point is known more for its politics, its infighting, its denominational issues, all those other things than it is its actual ministries. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like we're known more as like a voting block for who, generally speaking, the party that we vote for, don't vote for, and all that other stuff, or our political platforms than it is our actual ministries. And I just feel like we are living in a world now where people have become so turned off by that, but who still have a desire, who have this need, this holy desire to find answers in this world. And so the question for me isn't, oh my gosh, where are all the sheep going? Where are the sheep? Where are the sheep? The question is, where are the shepherds? Where are the shepherds? Where are the people going out into this world to show people what it truly looks like to be a follower of Christ? To show this uncommon love that only exists through knowing Jesus and through the power of the Holy Spirit. Where is that gone? And I feel very comfortable preaching a sermon like this in a place like this for a variety of reasons, but first and foremost because I feel in my heart and in my soul, more so than I've ever felt it in my entire life, that it is the Lord's desire and mandate upon our church to be used to shepherd the lost sheep of this community, of this city, of this state, and of this world. I believe that. I believe that when Jesus tells Peter, if you really love me, you're going to feed my sheep, that's a calling to each and every one of us. It's calling to each and every one of us. I've had a lot of struggles this week with this passage because I have realized that for so much, like I said, so much of my ministry career, if you want to call it that, I have focused way too much time, effort, and energy on a lot of things that truly don't matter. I've focused so much of my effort and energy on a lot of things that I can't imagine. I'll tell a quick story. I don't know why I keep doing this, but I said at 8:30 I would only tell it there because that one's not recorded. This one is recorded, but let's not share this clip. So Connor, if you're watching this isn't the one you cut. But several years ago at a previous church, I was the youth director. Thought my job and all the other stuff was to, minister to the youth, right? Well, there was a lot going on at the church. Without going into too much detail, there was some infighting going on. I know that if it sounds, hard to believe that in the church I was at there was infighting, but there was, and it got to a point where church officer election season came along, and there were some a lot of stuff that was happening, and there was a slate of candidates that was given, and then there were petitions signed to get another slate of candidates put on there. So we had a bona fide election at the church, like an election, like you would do, coming over here to Tyson Hall and electing people. We had that happen. It was insane. I remember it was on Zoom, and we did it like on a Monday or Tuesday night. I can't remember. But what I remember more than anything else is probably the moment in my life that I felt so completely ashamed to be a pastor, because my boss at the church called me into his office and said, okay, listen, here's what I need you to do. For the next 2 days leading up to this thing, I need you and your intern to call all the high school students. I need you to call all the college students. I need you to tell them that they need to vote for these people. And so for 48 straight hours, well, not really 48 straight hours, that's a huge stretch, but for my time when I was at the church, I wasn't planning lessons, praying for kids, or doing anything like that. I was making campaign calls on behalf of my boss to tell these kids who didn't know what was going on, who all they wanted to do was come to church and be with their friends and learn about Jesus. And I'm calling them to tell them, hey, make sure you log on to this because you're a member. Make sure you vote for these people. And the day after the election happened, I remember sitting in my office, and another one of my coworkers came in and was like, man, it's just crazy. And I was like, I got to be honest with you, I've never felt more disgusted and sickened in my entire life for myself calling myself a minister after doing all that. We have, and I was reminded of that so much this week, about how many ways and how many times I myself, listen, if you don't know this about me well enough, generally every sermon that I preach is also a complete and total conviction of myself, knowing that I have to be better about this. Because I read this over and over again, and I read exactly what Jesus is telling Peter to do. Peter, if you really, really love me, you'll feed my sheep, you'll tend my flock, you'll shepherd this flock. You'll make sure that everybody in the world knows who I am and knows this incredible story that has saved you and saved millions upon millions upon billions of other people on this planet that have lived before and will live after. And your calling is to feed those sheep. And that's it. Even if it means, giving up your own selfish ambitions, your own life, you're supposed to feed my sheep. And I can't tell you how convicting it's been to realize how many times in my ministry career that I've not been doing that. But I truly believe in the world we live in, where pretty much everywhere that our young people turn, they're being told that you're not good enough. They're being told that they're not made the way that they're supposed to be. They're told that, hey, you should be like this particular image and not the image that God already made you in. And we're seeing all these things happen. We're seeing these people just en masse leave the church. And we're sitting here sometimes focused on the most ridiculous things on earth, our politics, our polity, and all this other stuff, instead of focusing on the things that really matter, and that's feeding the sheep. The sheep are out there. And what's needed more than anything else is more shepherds. There's a passage in Romans that's been going through my head ever since I've been standing up here, where it talks about like, all right, well, how are the people going to hear if no one tells them? And how are they going to hear if there are no preachers and pastors to go out there and people just like us that go out there and tell people about it, that show them what it looks like to know and truly love Jesus? So many people have left the church because of problems with the institutional church, not a problem with Jesus. And I just believe in my heart and in my soul that this place, this church right here on Kentucky Avenue is in such a unique spot for the Lord to use an incredible and mighty way to feed the sheep of this community, of this state, of this world. And what it takes more than anything else is for us to surrender our own ambitions, all the other things that we hold on to, and allow Jesus to work through us. Jesus shepherds us so that we can shepherd others. And that's not just something for myself and the other clergy and church staff to do. That's for all of us. So I just pray. And I pray that you would join with me in praying these things going forward, that we would be a place that the Lord uses in a great and mighty way to bring the lost sheep in this community back to the shepherd. And I believe that there's such a deep desire. I see it in our young people. I see a hunger for truth and reality. I see a hunger for wanting to know what's real. They're out there searching for answers to life's biggest questions. We should be the place where they find those answers. And I believe the Lord wants to use us in that incredible way. So I pray that you would join with me in making a commitment that we want to be a place, that we want to be a people that goes out in this world, whether it's not just here, but in our work, in our schools, in our homes. And we feed the sheep that the Lord has given to us to feed. Let's pray.